In November of 2016, 34-year-old Sherri Papini made national headlines when she was abducted while jogging. Now, nearly 6 years later, she's being charged with lying and faking her abduction. Now, before we jump into today's case, let me give you a warm welcome. I'm Brooke, and this is Armchair Investigator. It's so good to have you here with me today, and I hope you enjoy the video. Now, let's get you up to speed on the real-life Gone Girl. Family first reported Sherri missing after she failed to return home from an afternoon jog on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2016. Her family described her as supermom, so when she didn't pick up from daycare, they knew something was terribly wrong. Using the Find My iPhone app, her husband tracked her cell phone to a road near their home on Sunrise Drive, just north of Redding.
So I just got home from work, and my wife wasn't there, which is unusual.
Okay, what's your last name?
Papini, P-A-P-I-N-I.
And your first name?
Keith.
K-E-I-T-H?
Yes. I found her phone, and it's got, hair ripped out of it, in the headphones. So I'm, totally freaking out, thinking, somebody, grabbed her.
Okay. What's your wife's name?
I'm going to, knock on every door. Sherri, S-H-E-R-R-I.
When's the last time you heard from her?
She sent me a text asking me if I was coming home for lunch. I don't know if I'm allowed to knock on everybody's door, but I will if I'm allowed to do that.
Well, let's just have the officers contact you so they can start, processing everything, figure out what's going on, okay?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Police used tracker dogs around the area, but they didn't pick up any scent. I wonder why. Sherri's family was devastated and terrified. They were doing everything they could to bring her home. A $40,000 reward was being offered for her discovery. Friends set up GoFundMe pages, and her husband Keith even appeared on Good Morning America, insisting his wife was taken against her will. It wasn't just her family that was desperate to find her. The Redding community Sherri called home wanted to see her found safe too. To everyone's relief, she was found alive on Thanksgiving morning in Yolo County, 146 miles away from her home. She allegedly was released in a secluded area and then flagged down help on Interstate 5. She was found still wearing restraints around her wrists, ankles, and waist, had scabs and bruises all over her body, was branded on her right shoulder, and her hair had been chopped off. She was taken to a hospital in Sacramento, treated for her injuries, and released the same day. Who had done this to Sherri and why? I hope you can read the sarcasm there. Still, it was a question that both the police and the public wanted answers to. Sherri said her captors were two Hispanic women who had pulled up next to her during her jog in a dark-colored SUV. She said one woman pulled out a small revolver and ordered her into the vehicle. She went on to detail that they had played mariachi music during the drive from the scene of the abduction to the residence she was held at. For the 22 days she was held captive, Sherri claimed the women's faces were often covered with bandanas, but said one of them was in her 20s or 30s and had thin eyebrows, pierced ears, and long curly hair. The other woman was between 40 and 50, had thick eyebrows and straight black hair with some gray in it. In her initial interview, Sherri said her abductors claimed law enforcement was involved in her kidnapping, saying her buyer was a cop. She said the two women kept her in a closet and forced her to use a bucket with kitty litter as a toilet. Sherri said the kitty litter was her own suggestion. In the months following Sherri's alleged kidnapping and release, little progress was made in the case. Police weren't even able to determine a motive. While Sherri was providing all of these details, none of the information was actually enough to help police find her abductors. It wasn't long before rumors sparked that the abduction was all a hoax, something the family, the sheriff, and even the mayor of Redding vehemently denied. The mayor even went as far as to call the naysayers online trolls. Then, in early 2017, a December 2003 incident report from the Shasta County Sheriff's Office was found. It wasn't much, in fact, the whole report was just 2 sentences, but it was enough to make detectives pause for a second. The report said Sherri's mother, Loretta, claimed that then 21-year-old Sherri had been harming herself and blaming it on her mother. While that report on its own wasn't enough to sway detectives, it was just one more thing to add to the ever-growing pile of suspicious things surrounding Sherri. The abnormalities surrounding Sherri's abduction were glaring. The first being how rare it is for women to be abducted by other women. The manner in which her phone was found also seemed suspicious. It had been found along with her earbuds neatly placed on the side of the road, with the screen facing up, playing her and Keith's wedding song, Michael Bublé's Everything, on repeat. There have also been reports that Sherri was allegedly talking to other guys just before her disappearance. Another thing investigators thought was odd was the fact Sherri told them when she was abducted, she slept most of the drive, at one point asking them if a stun gun would affect her memory. Now, being abducted would cause pure terror. You'd most likely go into survival mode. Think fight or flight. Your adrenaline would spike, causing your heart to beat faster, increasing your blood pressure, in part to keep you alert. But not Sherri. Apparently, she was able to sleep. Guess that mariachi music wasn't so annoying after all. Her husband Keith had passed a polygraph test about the incident and even offered to take another. In October of 2017, just before the one-year anniversary of her abduction, investigators announced that DNA from a woman was found on Sherri's body, and male DNA was discovered on the sweatpants and underwear that she was wearing the day she was found. Something detectives thought was odd since her captors were both female. The DNA wasn't a match to her husband's either. The sample was uploaded to CODIS, but it didn't pull a match, at least not right away. After announcing the DNA findings, more than 4 years would go by with no significant updates made public until March of 2022, when the FBI and local law enforcement made a massive announcement. Sherri had not in fact been kidnapped and tortured. She had actually been staying, voluntarily, with her ex-boyfriend James Reyes in Costa Mesa. Come again? Could you repeat that? Why, sure I will. Sherri had not, in fact, been kidnapped and tortured. She had actually been staying, voluntarily, with her ex-boyfriend James Reyes in Costa Mesa. Let's break this down. So, of course, investigators and law enforcement are working quietly behind the scenes to gather information without making any of it public, including keeping what they knew from Sherri. In 2019, investigators requested a familial DNA search, a technique that searches offender DNA databanks for a father, son, or brother of an unknown perpetrator. In March of 2020, investigators were notified that a potential male relative of the unknown DNA found on Sherri's clothing had been identified, and that family member was related to her ex-boyfriend, James Reyes. This takes forensic science to a whole nother level. Can you imagine getting busted for a crime based on the DNA of one of your family members that gets used against you? Crime does not pay, kids. Crime does not pay, unless you're Simon Levive. 3 months later, on June 9th, investigators traveled to Reyes' apartment to collect items from his trash. This is actually a common tactic referred to as a trash pull. Kind of gross, I get it, but it often yields pretty good intel, and it worked out in this situation too. They were able to pull DNA from a bottle of green tea that matched the DNA collected from Sherri's clothing. And bada boom, bada bing, another piece of the puzzle is being put together. In August of 2020, investigators visit Reyes again in order to sit down and talk with him. It's then he admits that he helped Sherri run away. Side note, you're soon going to find out just what else he helped Sherri do. It was more than just run away. Back in 2015, James had found some of Sherri's personal items and sent them to her parents. The two had known each other since they were teenagers, dated in 2006, and at one point had been engaged. Upon receiving these items, Sherri calls James and confides in him that she'd been saving money and had a plan to run away with him. She told him her husband Keith was abusing her and she was trying to escape. Sherri even told James she had filed police reports, but the police weren't doing anything about it. That's when he agreed to come and get Sherri on November 2nd. According to Shasta County Sheriff officials, Sherri hadn't filed any reports against her husband. On August 13th, 2020, just days after their interview with James, investigators asked Sherri and her husband Keith to come down to the police station. During their interview, Sherri would not budge on her original story, denying that she ran away with her ex. However, once her husband left the interview room, Sherri admitted that her and her ex did talk a little before her disappearance, but still stuck by her original story that 2 Hispanic women kidnapped her. Fortunately for us, unfortunately for Sherri, James had already spilled all the details to detectives. And boy, did he spill the details. Get ready. James told detectives that Sherri cut her own hair, and her injuries were mostly self-inflicted. There were, however, a couple things that she asked for his assistance on. He did admit to shooting a hockey puck at her leg, but only after she told him to. He was also the one who branded her, but she asked him to do that too. So after a trip to the local Hobby Lobby to buy a wood-burning tool, he branded her right shoulder. I'm not joking. He literally went to Hobby Lobby. I'm not hating on Hobby Lobby. I can easily waste 4 hours of my Saturday there. Just saying. He went on to tell investigators he was nervous and wanted to hold steady because the tool was so hot it glowed red. I think he means Sherri needs to hold steady. And while he said he wasn't sure of Sherri's intentions during her stay with him, he believed they might end up in a romantic relationship again. 'Cause nothing says I love you quite like being branded with a Hobby Lobby burning tool. While we're talking about this brand, let's jump into it a little bit more because this brand has become so elusive. Police didn't want to release photos of it. Nobody really knows what it looks like. And apparently, it is not a brand that you think of like a symbol. Apparently, it's more of a message. It is just wild seeing how people went off on these goose chases, tearing apart this message and what it meant. And this whole entire time, her and her ex did this. I can't. Sounds like Sherri didn't find life with James all that great. Eventually, she told him that she missed her kids and asked to be taken back to Redding. The two made the 7-hour drive back in a rental car where he dropped Sherri off on a country road along I-5. Can you imagine how awkward that 7-hour trip must have been? He told investigators that she brought stuff to bind her own wrists and ankles. Prosecutors say Sherri applied for and received more than $30,000 from the California Victims' Compensation Board, an organization that provides financial assistance and compensation to victims of crime. Federal prosecutors filed court documents claiming both Keith and Sherri used the donations from a GoFundMe account for personal use. On December 6th, Keith wrote himself a check for $31,818.13 from that account. After paying down credit cards, the couple allegedly divided the rest of the money between their bank accounts for personal spending. According to prosecutors, her little stunt cost Shasta County, state and federal taxpayers, crime victims, and donors more than $200,000. She also took resources away from real victims who truly could have used the help. Her lies also led to harmful consequences for the local Latino community, who for months were on edge, especially the women, with many of them taking extra precautions so as not to place unnecessary targets on their backs. This included not walking in twos, and those with dark SUVs were nervous about driving to work and even going to the store. Can you imagine not being able to go out with your daughter, your mother, your sister, friend, for fear of being accused of being the two Hispanic women that kidnapped Sherri? Heartbreaking. By this point, quite a few people from Sherri's past were speaking out about her, describing her as a serial liar. A different ex spoke out saying she was a compulsive liar and would regularly make up bizarre stories and lie about the most menial things like surfing. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Sacramento has charged Sherri with wire fraud and lying to authorities. She was granted release on a $120,000 bond and mandated psychiatric treatment. She was also ordered to turn over her passport. She's due to appear in federal court for a preliminary hearing on March 25th. If convicted, she faces up to 25 years in prison. Do you remember hearing about this case back in 2016? If so, what were your initial thoughts regarding it? Were you already suspicious of her back then? Obviously, I don't personally know Sherri, but she really does come off as somebody who is very entitled, somebody who is very self-centered. I almost get the feeling that she was so bored with her life that she was looking for something to just completely turn her life upside down. And this was the master plan that she came up with. I don't know, but it sounds like she's been doing stuff like this for a big part of her life. Let me be clear, I do not think this case is funny, especially with the amount of damage that she's caused, the amount of harm. It's sickening. But what is funny to me is her response to things. It's like she takes things to the extreme, especially with these photos that have come out with her in 2022 leaving the courthouse in absolute hysterics, holding on to people. I'll be following this case closely to see how it unfolds. She faces up to 25 years in prison, but I don't think she'll do that much time. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and hey, while you're at it, consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss out on the next investigation.